Ridgeway Brewery, Hamster of Doom.
Life is too short to be drinking shitty beer.
Welcome to another edition of Bands, Bikes and Booze Reviews. I've got one here today from the Ridgeway Brewery, and it is the Hamster of Doom Brown Ale with Bite. Now, Ridgeway, quite a good brewery. I've tried a few of their beers and the beer ain't bad. They do some pretty interesting beer, and they do like their traditional style British beers, and they put a twist on some of them, and this is what they've done with this one. Now, this is a brown ale, and in their own words, they've brought the brown ale into the 21st century. Now, what that means, I do not know, but it's one of my favourite styles of English beer, and I have tried some very good ones. For me, at the moment, out of all the ones I've tried, I think Sam Smith's do the best one. Their nut brown ale is just out of this world. I love it every time I go into a Sam Smith's pub when COVID isn't about. Christ, that's almost a year ago now. Jesus Christ. Haven't been in a Sam Smith's pub in a year. Fucking hell. But I always go for the brown ale. That's the first drink I normally get. It's either that or the wheat beer. Or if it's a hot day, I'll have the lager. But they're all good beers from Sam Smith. The Newcastle Brown can just fuck off, because that is a pile of shit. That hasn't been good for years. I've tried the odd brown ale in between. There's one that I really want to try, but I just cannot get hold of it down here. It's the Double Maxim. Now, Asda's do it, but I've tried the Asda's down here. They don't do it. I think it must be a regional thing. But I will find an online retailer that does Double Maxim, and I will get it. I bet there's loads of Geordies and Mackhams laughing at me now because I can't find a bottle of Double Maxim, because it must be really common up there, but nope, can't find it. But there you go. But I've got a bottle of this stuff, and I like what Ridgeway do. They do some good stuff. I've got a couple of theirs in the fridge. I tried their Imperial Barley Wine and their Imperial Red Ale, which I really liked. They were good. So I'm hoping this is going to follow in the same vein. So let's get this open and let's see what's going on. Before we get it open, I'll just give you a quick rundown. It's 5.8% in the volume. It's 500ml. On the back, it says unpasteurised, brown, neoteric, nutty, fresh, and with bite. And ingredients: water, what else? Barley, malt, and yeast. They're never going to put the additives in there, are they? Even if there was ones. But it just says brown ale with bite. That's what the bottle looks like. Very satanic. Cap is just plain black. Let's get it open. Let's see what's going on. Right, cap is just plain black, as I just showed you. The aromas I'm expecting that should come from this are quite nutty, roasted caramel, and that's about it really. Brown ale is normally relatively sweet. They say they've put a bit of bite on this, but let's have a gander. Here it is in a glass. They say it's unpasteurised. Does it say it's unfiltered? Nope. So it's relatively clear. A lot of carbonation in that. On the nose. Very little. There's some caramel malt on that, but it's really vague. Oh, that's disappointing. Now this is slightly chilled. That is the way you are supposed to have brown ale. Most beers you have at cellar temperature, some at room temperature. Brown ale is always supposed to be chilled if it's a traditional Newcastle style brown ale. I don't mean Newcastle, well that is supposed to be drunk chilled, but most brown ale is anyway, traditional brown ale. Getting a little bit of nuttiness coming through there, but it could, if it was a Marston's beer, I would say, yeah, this is what Marston's do. Beer with no flavour and no aroma, but we'll have to see. Sometimes I've been proved wrong. Sometimes beer with no aroma has some great flavours in, and sometimes vice versa. Beer with no flavour has quite a lot of aroma. That's unusual though. It's normally the other way around. Anyway, let's stop waffling. Get this down, my Gregory. Bottoms up. Slightly more flavour than a Marston's beer, and that is a little bit disappointing, to be honest. Let me just calm it down a little bit. Let me dive in again, see if I can get anything else. Hops are coming through a little bit more now, and it's a mixture of roasted malt and the spicy bitterness that you get from British hops or English hops, if you like. And there's quite a bit of that on the finish. On the palate though, there isn't really that much, which is again disappointing. The finish is bigger than the flavour on the palate, which sometimes you do get, but I don't know, they're normally quite good, the stuff they do. Certainly the barley wine. Now I know barley wine is a bit of an extreme beer, but they were really good. Good representations of the style. But this, you know, I'm just lacking that oomph that you get from a really good brown ale. Yeah, it's got quite a bit of finish, I will say that. And you are getting them hops. But as I say, on the palate, not much. It's starting to come through now a little bit more as you build up on these. Some beers are like this. They're like creeper beers, and you know, the more you drink, the more the flavour builds up, and you get used to it. However, I'm not sure whether I've served this a little bit too cold. Then maybe this should be at cellar temperature. At the moment it's quite cold. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to let this calm down a little bit, and then I'm going to taste it, see if I can get any more flavours. But before I do that, I just want to make it clear that brown ale is supposed to be served from the fridge. Certainly Newcastle brown, that is the tradition. And I know in the Sam Smith's pubs the nut brown ale is kept in a fridge, and you still get the big nutty flavours from it. But on this, it's just lacking a little bit, and it It doesn't give me a serving temperature on here. So what I'm going to do, just to give it a fair crack at a whip, I'm going to let it warm up a little bit, and then I'm going to taste it again, because I don't want to be slagging this beer off if the flavour's being masked by the temperature. So watch this space. Okay, I've let this warm up a little bit, and hopefully I'm going to get a little bit more flavour out of it. So let's dive in again. There is more flavour, I will say that, and it's quite nice. The finish is a lot longer now, but I think what they've come up with here isn't a brown ale. When they say they put a modern twist on it with English hops, I think they've created a bitter. Not a bad one, I will say that. It's not a brown ale. I would never class this as a brown ale. Not with the finish. It's big. The finish is big. It's big and it's bitter. It's spicy and bitter. But it's nice. It's not bad, all things considered. The only problem I have is with the classification. It's not a brown ale. One thing I will say, I don't think this should be drunk straight out of the fridge like a genuine brown ale should be. The flavours aren't there for that. This is more of a bitter. I think if you treat this as a bitter, you're going to really appreciate it, because it is. The flavours, where this is probably now cellar temperature, I'd say, and the flavours are much bigger. And I think they should put that on the label, that this should be at least served at a slightly warmer temperature than chilled. And yeah, now the flavours are big. If this was the sort of first mouthful I'd be taking, I'd be all out in favour of this, saying that what a great beer it is. But it's not a brown ale. I think that they've come up with a really good bitter. I know I'm repeating myself here, but they've come up with a really good bitter, in my opinion. Really flavoursome bitter. And calling it a brown ale, I think the correct classification would be an ESB. That is, the ABV is 5.8%. That's an ESB. And it's nice. Really good. Now that I've got that out of the way, I've got the classification out of the way, and it's warmed up slightly. Yeah, the flavours are much bigger and nicer. The aromas, even the aromas are coming through now as well. Still not massive, but yeah, big caramel malt, a lot of spicy, earthy, hoppy notes, English hop, bitterness on the aroma and on the flavour as well. Yeah, that's really nice. See, when I did the video recently on beer temperature and the correct, how you should treat the temperature of a beer with quite a lot of respect, because you're going to miss out a hell of a lot if you serve it at the wrong temperature. This is a prime example. This has to be served, in my opinion, to get the full flavour from this beer. I think it has to be served slightly above room temperature, no more than cellar temperature, and you're going to get all them flavours. And the flavours are big on this. They really are big. The finish is really nice, bitter. But again, as it is with the temperature, the classification on this beer, I think it's wrong as well. It should be called a bitter, an extra special bitter. So if you get that out of the way, this is actually not bad. And I was quite surprised with Ridgeway, because I tried a few of their beers before and I thought they were really good. And this tasted initially like a Marston's beer when it was cold. But now I'm getting the full flavour of it, and it's really nice. That's really good. So what's the verdict on this one? Well, 2 tips before you try it. As I've just said, don't serve this cold. don't think of it as a brown ale. Forget that brown ale with bite on the front. Think of that as a extra special bitter, because that's what it is, and it's really nice. Finish is absolutely massive on this. You really do get the English hop finish on that. Lots of spice, lots of earthy notes, which make it bitter. And I had a real downer on this, and I'm glad I waited for that to warm up, because I was going to give this a very low mark indeed. I'll tell you what I'm going to give it. I'm going to give it 7.5. And the reason I'm going to give it 7.5 is the wrong classification, and they really should put on this that it needs to be drunk either at room temperature or at cellar temperature, not in the traditional way that certainly a brown ale from the northeast should be drunk. And even, you know, I'm saying that Sam Smiths do their nut brown ale, and I've always drunk it out of the fridge, and the flavours are still big on it. This one needs to be calmed down on the chill, as they say. So I think 7.5 is a solid 7.5, and I recommend it. But just if you're going to do it, I've got it from Beers of Europe. It's still on there now. Well worth checking out. Just remember what I've said, and remember, beer is working class champagne.